A world on fire can't last forever. We're gonna mend it together. A stitch in time is gonna save nine. A stitch in time is gonna save nine. And I wanna be a catalyst for change. Trying something different. I wanna change the rules of the game. 'Cause even the smallest bird can fly up to the top of the tree. And I wanna be a catalyst and find out what could be. Dream, dream, dreaming together. Some say hope is a thing with feathers. We're gonna dream, dream, dream together. It sings a song, never stops at all. It sings a song, never stops at all. And I wanna be a catalyst for change. Trying something different. I wanna change the rules of the game. 'Cause even the smallest bird can fly up to the top of the tree. And I wanna be a catalyst and find out what could be. Walk, walk, walk along together, side by side, through this stormy weather. We're gonna walk, walk, walk along together, hand in hand, hand in hand, hand in hand, hand in hand. And I wanna be a catalyst for change.
Welcome to Catalyzing Change Week. This year's Catalyzing Change Week is about solutions from the front lines by social innovators.
In 2022, Catalyst 2030 concentrated its efforts on bringing proximate leaders and frontline solutions to the forefront. Collaborations led by members from the Global South produced groundbreaking reports on climate and transforming education, with an emphasis on offering local solutions. We continued our mission to create an enabling environment for social entrepreneurs to flourish by initiating a letter to donors, signed by more than 1,200 social entrepreneurs and innovators. The Catalyst 2030 awards ceremony was spectacular, and the awards themselves welcomed by the private sector, governments, bio multilaterals and donors.
Catalyst 2030 as a movement is disruptive.
One of the best things I think that's come out of Catalyst 2030 so far is incredible collaboration across the ecosystem that just didn't exist before Catalyst came into being.
The thing I love most about Catalyst is that it's an open movement for social entrepreneurs around the world.
I'd encourage anyone who's looking to be more connected with their local communities around social development goals to come along to Catalyzing Change Week.
Welcome to Catalyzing Change Week.
Wow, I love that video. Doesn't matter how many times I see it. I'd like to welcome everybody to this session on Lights for Literacy. As a very proud member of the Catalyst community, I'm really excited when we talk about catalyzing change through interlinking multiple SDGs. And I think that it's really exciting that we have this amazing group of people from Uganda and from the US. Originally, one of our participants is also from Nigeria. And we're going to be able to talk about this intersection between literacy and energy access, a really critical input. So a few words of housekeeping. If you are attending the session and are able to, please keep your video on, but your microphone off. Please keep muted unless called on during the question and answer session at the end. Please make sure that you are engaging respectfully in both the chat as well as if you are unmuted and are going to be asking questions. We are very committed to making sure that we are in a safe and nurturing space as we try to catalyze change. And this will be an interactive panel. We have some incredible panelists here today who will be responding to some questions, but also responding to one another and working to try to make this as interesting and interactive as possible. So thank you for those few housekeeping remarks. And let me first start off by saying, my name is Sarah Baird. I am the Executive Director of Let There Be Light International. We are a nonprofit based in the US, but working with 12 grassroots organizations across 4 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And our mission is to try to address both climate change and energy poverty through innovative solar programming. Today, we're going to be talking about our literacy project and with the experts on the ground who are doing the implementation of the project, as well as with a member of a consulting group that's looking at how to best move this project forward and perhaps scale it. And but other things that Let There Be Light does is we work on maternal and infant health, and we work with people living with disabilities, and we're trying to address energy need and in a non-market based approach, so a safety net approach. And I then want to introduce the other people who will be on our panel today. We do have George Mike Luberenga and Caroline Mubweza and Gabriel Sisendo from Solar Health Uganda. Now, Solar Health Uganda is an NGO based in Uganda in the Wakiso district, and they're doing programming throughout the country of Uganda, trying to help those people who really are struggling with energy poverty, but also based on whether it's age, geography, disability status, affordability gaps, or sometimes gender, are unable to participate in market-based solutions to energy poverty, which would mean purchasing their own lights or getting connected to the electrical grid, which in most cases is not in the communities that we're working with. So we have George Mike, who is our regional director of programming, and Caroline, who is our maternal and infant health programmer and director of projects. And we have Gabriel, who's our artist in residence, who is addressing, helping us document both the need and the impact when we're working in these communities. Next, we have William Kesa from Njuba. William is the Chief Literacy Officer at Njuba. And Njuba is a catalytic children's education organization that's aimed at improving learning outcomes and developing life skills through teacher training, spelling bees, including the Uganda National Spelling Bee, and they co-founded the African Spelling Bee, and publishing beautifully illustrated, culturally appropriate children's books. Njuba works in 1,500 schools in Uganda, reaching over 1.5 million children, and they've trained 7,500 teachers. Committed to meaningful change and informed by the context on the ground, William joins us as a catalytic change leader. And last but not least, but giving us the broad overview and the expertise to look at our programming and try to extract what's working, what can be improved, we have Ua Uboha from the Wharton Global Impact Consultants Group here in the United States. She's a first-year MBA student at Wharton and is a consultant for Wharton Global Impact Consultants. Prior to joining Wharton, She has almost a decade of experience working in the energy industry across Nigeria and the US to provide access to reliable and sustainable energy solutions. I'm going to pause for a second to share my screen with a slide that is an informative overview slide that hopefully will help us to reflect on what we're doing and can give you some ideas about what this project looks like. So let me know if you can see my slide. Great. So the Lights for Literacy project was begun in 2020, and it was. I'm going to let the experts on the ground fill us in a bit more, but it was essentially launched in response to the global pandemic and the educational lockdowns in Uganda. So this was an informational slide created by the Wharton Global Impact Consultants team. As we go through the session, we'll refer to some of the programmatic impacts, but I would encourage our panelists to also share some stories to help us to see the issue of energy poverty and literacy in a more direct light. So I'm going to start with George Mike from Solar Health Uganda. And I'm hoping, George, that you could give us a brief overview of Lights for Literacy. So why was the project developed? How was the project developed? And maybe who was involved? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. The Lights for Literacy initiative was initiated by Let There Be Light International in collaboration with Solar Health Uganda and the Uganda Spelling Bee and Juba. The Lights for Literacy program, it aims to improve literacy levels among students residing in off-grid households. The program involves providing a combination of Pico solar lights and books to the participants. However, the focus is not just on distributing these items, but also on eliciting feedback from the beneficiaries, the participants, on the benefits and utility of the lights and books and enhancing their literacy. The program seeks to encourage the participants to think about how they can leverage these resources to improve their literacy skills. The Lights for Literacy program was initiated in September 2020 during the school lockdown, which was prompted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The decision to launch the program was driven by the growing concerns expressed by the initiators who were troubled by the reports in the media and local communities about the plight of adolescents who were out of school. Many girls were reported to have become pregnant, while a significant number of boys and girls had turned to work to support themselves, causing a shift in their focus away from the studies. The initiators recognized the potential long-term consequences of this situation and were motivated to take action to address this situation. Thank you.
Thanks, George Mike. So reflecting on that, I would love to hear a little bit from William, if you could. Do you have things to add to that? Do you have, maybe even giving us some examples of why this is important? Why do kids need lights at home?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I think one of the major things that really came out of all this was to realize that being in a country like ours, where you are unable to read, and we are talking about a country that is having more than 52% of its population below 15 years. Now, we went in the lockdown for more than 2 years. So what this program particularly did was not trying to provide lights and books, but then also to help them to see how can they be able to engage in reading, also engaging the parents themselves, because they are stuck with these children and they didn't know what to do. Many of them, they had, yes, unlimited time with the children, but they didn't know what to do. So what this program did was want to provide books and also provide lights, such that they're able to have extended time reading. And of course, we know what comes with reading. Children will fall in love with reading. And of course, definitely that is going to help them to improve their learning outcomes. And by then, we didn't know when the lockdown was going to be lifted, but we knew that made the bigger impact that we shall share going forward. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. And I thought maybe we could have quickly each person who's actually doing the programming in Uganda to reflect maybe on what's one of these stats that you look at, looking at the impact. So, you know, we had lockdown in Uganda. We had children who were out of school for 2 years. We had families who were struggling to help the children keep up with their learning while they weren't in school. And as some people may or may not know, in many homes in communities that are resource constrained, there are not books in the home. So getting these books into the home was important, but also then making sure that the children had the light, had the safe environment to study. So maybe Carolyn, you can kick us off with what did you, when looking at this slide, what do you find to be kind of the most exciting or the thing that makes you want to continue with the program?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. One of the things that really encourage us to continue with the Lights for Literacy project is the combination of a book and a light, the impact it brings out. Because when you see directly, you see when you're giving out the lights, it's like you are trying to impact on the SDG 4 and the book SDG 4 and the light, the SDG 7. But indirectly, we are also having interlinkages within the SDGs, providing a light, providing a book. We are seeing interlinkages between the SDGs 4 and 7, and then 1, 3, and then 13. We see providing the book and the light to the children, besides the education being impacted and, you know, increasing the hours of light. We see them with having some clean air in the home, reduced risks of fire, but also we are seeing the parents are able to save money, and then they're able to, you know, cater other things around at home. And also we are seeing an increase because as we give out these lights to these children, we usually have sessions with them where we talk about, you know, the climate change, how is it affecting us and all that. So also increases on awareness about climate change among the children. And there, you know, we are also trying to address SDG 13. So what's really motivates us is we see the impact of just a book and a light, and how indirectly we are also trying to impact on other SDGs. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. And as in a more kind of immediate or direct experiential kind of way, Gabriel, can you, as the most recent student, now Gabriel has been out of secondary school for a couple of years now, but he well remembers trying to do his revisions, working in a community that had some challenges. And so Gabe, as the most recent student among us, how do you see this project? And do you find this valuable to the young learners who you would know?
Thank you, Sarah. I think
I'm afraid you have some background.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Gabriel Senyondo, and I'm the artist in residence for SHU and Let There Be Light. And as a recent student, because I did my my Form 6 in 2019, and I see this project as essential to students, especially those ones in rural areas, because education is a fundamental right to every student, and lack of the necessities, especially study material and light, can affect the quality of education for students in rural areas. And in many circumstances, parents and schools in rural areas fail to provide the study material and other necessities for basic education. For me, I'm short-sighted, and I'm imagining a situation in a rural area that is off-grid, where there can be a student with the same problem or even a severe one, reading from the dim light provided by the kerosene lamp or a candle. Can affect their performance, and it can even raise health concerns for such students. As an artist in residence, I do paintings that raise awareness about the risks faced by not only children but also elders and other categories of people. So the dim light can affect their performance, because and a lot of parents in rural areas are illiterate, and they don't know the problems faced and how it can affect the performance of the children because of lack of energy, especially light, and lack of study. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel. That was really helpful. And I think I'm going to bounce back quickly to George Mike before moving on to Uav, because George, it would be great if we had a little bit more context. So for instance, what percentage of the people in these rural communities have access to electricity, number one? And number two, what are some of the ways that the people are then using their savings when they're no longer having to buy kerosene or candles or even disposable flashlights? How are they using the savings? And is there any impact on education there?
Beg your pardon, Sarah. Just a moment.
Did you need me to ask again?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay, so I was wondering, in these communities where we're working, what percentage of the people have access to electricity? And if they do not have access to electricity, what are they using for lighting? And then the third part of the question is, when they are able to then have solar light in the homes, how are they redirecting the savings?
Thank you. With going by percentage in the rural communities where we are working, you'd find about 3 out of 10 households having access to clean and safe lighting source, and about 7 of the households, they use the dirty, polluting sources of light. So what are these people using? Mostly it is big percentages, the kerosene. the kerosene, and then it is followed by the candles, and then also there is also a smaller percentage that is using some disposable torches, which actually we found that they are also a huge risk actually to our environment and the land particularly, because there are so many communities. Actually, we've had this mostly in northern Uganda. It's so common. In southwestern, we are sharing with a partner there based there in southwestern Uganda. They use a lot of there's a lot of use of these disposable torches. So these they are used once in a week, but people, they have to be like saving on the energy. So of course it can't take them the whole night. They have to use maybe a few minutes and then turn it off and then use another night like that. So there is use of that, and they always just throw them anywhere. So you could find them piled up in the community. And there is also a smaller percentage of people who are especially homes that are headed by elders, where you would find that people go to sleep without light. So they have to have like dinner early, and the students, of course, they don't actually have a chance to read books during the night. So there are those actually who don't go with the light. Actually, we've found a number of those when we've been on the mountains, on mountain slopes in Slonko, Mountain Elgon, where we found elders, a couple of elders were using just sticks to light their home, like maize sticks, so to light their house. So that's so common. It's so common with the elders. Yeah. So so that is it for the most of what they use. So you would find the fewer percentage of the 3 people in the household who are having access to clean lights. They would be having maybe a pay-as-you-go solar system. That is common, and those are the people who would say that they are well off, who can afford to pay, because they have to pay on a weekly basis to have the light. When they don't pay, they don't have the light. So that is what is mostly common in the communities where we operate.
Great, and I wanted to say that it's we are very data driven here at Let There Be Light International with our partners. So we're doing a lot of intake surveys and follow-up surveys, which when you combine 2 programs, when you take a solar light program and you take a literacy program in which a book is provided, sometimes that can lead to some complications. So because it's just a lot of questions to ask, a lot of programming, a lot of training. And so now I'd like to turn to Ua and ask, first of all, why was this project of interest as a pro bono project to the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton team? And then some of the interesting things you found, but also some of the challenges. That would be great if you can address that.
Thank you, Sarah. So the Wharton Global Impact Consultants is a student-run consulting organization within the Wharton School. And the mission of the consulting organization is to provide consulting services to impact-driven organizations. And the mission of Let There Be Light, particularly for this Light for Literacy program, fits well within our mission by providing free lights to students, as well as also free books to students. So trying to work on SDG 4 and SDG 7. And so that was the key reason Wharton Global Impact Consultants decided to pursue this project. So it also gives students that consultants the opportunity to gain experience in consulting for the group, and also gain a deeper understanding of these developmental issues across sub-Saharan Africa. In terms of some of the interesting things we found, I think if we go to that overview impact slide, when we started the program, we had 3 key work streams planned. The first work stream was to crystallize the impacts of the program. Second work stream was to create a data collection and evaluation strategy. And third work stream rather was to evaluate a scaling strategy. And so diving deeper into the first work stream, looking at some of the impacts, and I think Caroline mentioned this when she started talking about the interlinkages. So we're expecting to mainly find outcomes related to quality education and energy access, clean energy. But what we found was that the work by the Light for Literacy team went beyond that. And we saw secondary outcomes across 4 other SDGs. And so some interesting impact we saw was there was increased literacy rates. So students had learned to speak better, read new words, and also the books that were given were related to a key lesson or a key goal. And so we also found there were positive outcomes with regards to personal hygiene as well as awareness of climate change. In terms of some secondary outcomes, I think Caroline also mentioned this. So some families had closed from their day's activities quite early, but having those solar lights extended the time they had for their day's activities. And so with that, there was also reduced exposure to fire hazards, not having to use dangerous light sources such as candles and kerosene. And also related to the climate action, because the solar lights last for about 5 years, that also reduces CO2 emissions. In terms of some of the challenges, as you can imagine, is 2 organizations that have separate focuses in Juba and Solar Health Uganda coming together to drive this program. So the first one was with regards to some interorganizational frictions in planning the program and also executing it efficiently, but that was worked through with time. Second was with regards to data collection. So during each of the projects, the data in regards to forms being filled by parents and children was manually done. And as you can imagine, that takes a lot of time. And 2 separate forms were being given by Njuba and another by Solar Health Uganda. And so one of the things we're doing at Wharton Global Impact Consultants is to integrate this process. So we have one standard form going forward. And a third challenge was really in just engagement for both the parents as well as the children. So in parents in building trust, to get their children to come to the program, and in children is engaging them during the project. But the team has been able to come up with very creative ways of ensuring that they pre-engage the parents before the project is started, and also ensuring that the programming for the day is very interesting, with activities such as spelling, literacy lessons, as well as parenting lessons as well.
Great, thank you. I'd love to, before I play a short animation about the impact of having a safe light in the home, I'd love to turn to William and ask him to reflect a little bit on what was just talking about. Do you have anything else to add, or any reflections on this process?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And thank you all. I think it begins all the way to the state of the problem that we have, like George Mike has explained a few minutes ago, knowing that For example, the World Bank report that came shortly before COVID showed that 86% of children below 10 years cannot read and comprehend. That is what is normally called learning poverty. And right now, at the end of last year, another report came out and it had risen to 90%. So you see that the impact is huge. Now, what she has just brought out here is that, remember, these are two organizations working from different angles. One is into lights, another one is into education. Definitely used to working in silos. But now, in order for us to see a long-lasting impact, means that we are going to break these walls to work together and see how we meet the same people. They are having the same challenges, how we work together to move forward. So for me, I think that is a challenge that is us to embrace and see how we can be able to move forward. Because at the end of the day, we desire that our people will be able to get out of the state that they are in right now. Thank you.
Great, that's wonderful, and I think that really speaks to the catalyzing change movement and what we are trying as catalysts to do is this idea that we don't all operate or live or struggle in one specific silo, but in fact these pardon me, these issues are interrelated. And an innovative project like this that is willing to wrestle with some of those really complicated issues of how do you integrate two very distinct programs in not only just to help and streamline maybe or address this two different issues in one household, but actually to amplify or accelerate the impact by having these things recognized as part of a system, as part of a whole ecosystem. So I think it's really exciting that that we have these two organizations in Uganda who are willing to work together, willing to work through some of those complications, and hopefully come out with a stronger and more resilient and impactful project. So I'd love to bounce it over now to Solar Health Uganda, whoever there wants to reflect on and what's just been said. That would be great.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Specifically, when we talk about the issue of expenditure on lighting, we find that there are so many households who are unable to afford actually fuel. There are so many cases in households where we find that the students are restricted. Even when it comes to this unsafe light, the chaos in itself, like the students are limited to use the light. So of course it's not safe, but the families can't even afford it. So you will find that there is no chance for the students to read. So of course, such families, that's where a project like this comes in handy to support, because the solar light can go a long way. Like you just mentioned, it can go to it has a lifespan of 5 years. That's a long way it can take for a family, for these students using the light to enhance their studies. So it's really when it comes to affordability, is really a big issue with so many homes, so many families in the rural setting, the off-grid families, where even actually there are solutions that have tried to penetrate in some fewer communities of the pay-as-you-go, but these are not affordable. They are not affordable at all. So it really does reflect what Uwa has shared. It does really reflect what is in the communities and why really such help with solar, extending this service, extending this project to the off-grid household is really very important. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to, from my perspective here in the US, but I do spend some time visiting with and being hosted by Solar Health Uganda. I think one of the things that is really important for those of us coming from communities or countries where we do have access to electricity is to understand the affordability gap, to understand the burden on these families. And I'm talking about both for literacy as well as for lighting. So in these households, if there are not books and if there is not access to, for instance, the internet, if you don't have access to electricity, you're not going to be connected. It's really critical to be able to have your children have access to books. The other thing is with the lighting, the families that we're working with typically are spending between 10 and 30% of their total household income on dirty and dangerous lighting, often just one Tadoba, we call them. They're like little tins of kerosene with an open flame wick, very dangerous for children. And they emit particulate matter, which lodges in the lungs of especially of vulnerable young children. And so when a family is spending up to 30%, we can even go the low end. If a family is spending 10% of their income, when I talk to people here in New York State and say, imagine you're making, X amount of dollars, you spend 10% of that only on one inadequate and very dangerous and polluting light. And then all of a sudden you have access to electricity, and that 10% of your income is now freed up. And most people who we're working with on Lights for Literacy are redirecting those savings toward basic needs, including school fees. So it's a virtuous cycle that we're able to see here. And I'm going to briefly stop sharing and then share a brief animation. And I'd love us all to think about what we're seeing in it in terms of access to electricity, but also please note that there is a student who will be speaking to you. And so let me just stop that share, and I'm going to go into another brief sharing of my screen. And hopefully you all can see this animation. And
many people around the world must rely on dirty, dangerous, polluting kerosene for light. Let There Be Light International donates safe solar lights to vulnerable families in Africa. Solar lights are changing lives. Join us at Let There Be Light International.
So hopefully you all could hear that. It's obviously a very short overview animation of some of our general programming, but I love that it includes the student, the learner who speaks directly to the issue. And so I would really love to open it up to some of our panelists to discuss some more, how do you see this program going forward? Do you see that there's a potential for scaling? What would you like to say to other people working with education in off-grid communities, and just have a bit of a discussion there? And please, if you do have any questions, any of the audience, please put them in the chat, and we're excited to engage with you also. So, who wants to kick us off?
Yeah, if I may go fast quickly, definitely the issues that we are dealing with, since they are not yet solved, many of these learners still need books. There are so many people who are still off the grid. That's why we still need more collaboration. Our desire is that not just the two of us, Solar Health Uganda and NGOs, if more organizations, more entities, more like-minded people are able to come together, I believe we can cover more distance. The impact can be felt because we all know we can't sit here and think that just the two of us can be able to cover the entire country because the need is really high. So for me, I am for working together and seeing whatever we can to improve the lives of the people out there. Thank you. That would be my first comment.
Great. And I would say, William, let's not even limit it to Uganda. I mean, I think one of the exciting things about being part of Catalyst is that we are with like-minded people who are interested in sharing best practices, interested in the concept of systems change and trying to get out of our silos. So I think that that's really wonderful. And Solar Health Uganda, you're up. Solar Health, you guys, it looks like you might be paused for a moment. So maybe, Uwa, can you?
Okay, so when you were talking about systems change, it had me thinking about how education and energy are big catalysts for systems change. I mean, education, if we think about it, is instrumental in improving one's life. I mean, it's so key. And energy access underpins it all. I mean, in areas where there's energy access, studies have shown there's that strong correlation between increased energy access and better educational outcomes, improved literacy rates, improved mathematical skills. So I think a program like Lights for Literacy is filling such a big gap in closing that, in improving access. So one area I see going forward, one big challenge has been with regards to data, availability of data with regards to energy and also literacy in order to be able to make, for companies, for organizations, for governments to be able to make evidence-based decisions in providing funds to target these areas. And I see this as a key plug in where the Lights for Literacy program comes in. We've been collecting data. We have some of this data available, and going forward, this will be instrumental in helping us expand the program. So yes, I do see us a key way in filling that gap in providing lights and the books to children, but also in collecting that data, which can be used by governments, by NGOs, by other companies interested in working in this area.
Yes, and I think that it's interesting from a governmental or policy perspective that there are these very distinct silos. Of course, there's the energy ministry, and there's the education ministry, and it's very difficult no matter which country we're talking about, whether it's U.S., Uganda. It's very difficult to get the ministers to think, because they have limited budgets, to think about this expansion of their mandate. And so being able to back up the program impacts or our arguments for the integration of these projects is really critical, and can also provide an opportunity for instance, the education minister to reach their goals. So if more children are able to study at night, do their revisions, or schools have electricity, then this is a way to communicate that they will be able to fulfill their mandates better. And hopefully we can have that be integrated into the way we think about education. I know here in the US, we wouldn't consider having a child try to study in the dark. But we happen to have a tax basis that has allowed us to grow our educational sector, and to make sure that that is considered part of the basic needs. I think that there is room in some of the off-grid communities that we're talking about, for us to change the narrative, for us to, as we're talking about systems change this narrative so that we're not just talking about things that are very obvious that impact education, So teachers trainings, safe schools, books, of course, but also those even less, I guess, visible and yet utterly visible inputs like light, like food. You know, all these SDGs are interconnected, and I think that is one of the beautiful things about Catalyst, that they really help us to think about that. We're coming up on the top of the hour in a few minutes, so I'd love to open it up a little bit more. We're a small group here. I know we're recording, and there will be a lot of people who watch this afterwards. So so I would love to have people unmute as they'd like, and talk a little bit more about this, and ask us questions, or yeah. Solar Health, would you like to respond a little bit to the idea of scaling the project? Perhaps you're frozen again. I'm sorry about connectivity issues. Gabriel, do you want? It looks like you're not frozen. Gabriel's another member of Solar Health Uganda. So when you think about this project, Gabriel, how do you see the future of it, and what do you hope is the future of it, in terms of maybe going to different countries, or maybe being able to talk to the Minister of Education and say, you know, this is an interesting project. Can you address that maybe?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. This project for Lights for Literacy, as I communicated earlier, it is very helpful to children, especially that like in Uganda. A lot of children in rural areas don't have access to proper study material like books and even light, like portable solar lights. And the good thing about these solar lights, they don't need installation, and it is safe that a student can move with it wherever they want, and it is safe for their health too. And the study material can help them during, like, to build their vocabulary, especially the textbooks, like from Enjuba and Uganda Spelling Bee, and the solar lights can help them during preparation for their tests, for example, because it is handy. You can be with it wherever you can. You can use it when you are in your bed or under a mosquito net. So the project is really very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a question in the chat about how do we ensure that these lights aren't sold or stolen, or how do we teach the kids to keep these lights? And I would also add maybe books safe. Perhaps Caroline, you can address that one. Sorry, you're muted. Whoops. Did we lose you?
We make sure the lights are not sold, or they're not sold. First, as we work with this, as we go into our community, we work hand in hand with our local leaders in the community. We work with our teachers also, but also we involve the parents. So first of all, we usually have an education session with them. We tell them why we are giving them the light so that they understand, like we're giving them the light for this reason. You want them to be able to read at night, have some clean air at home and reduce the risk as all that, but also as they also give them the books, they tell them the reasons why we are giving them the books, why this project is important to them. But also we get in touch with the local leaders so that we make sure the local leaders are in touch with those people. We make sure they monitor the people so that nobody sells the light, they're not stolen. And another thing we do one of these days also label the solar light so that each solar light we give out is labeled. Yeah.
That's great. And so we're going to be wrapping up in a minute. And I would love for William, if he'd be so kind, to give us a story. Tell us about a child who you've dealt with or a family. And I know when I was in Uganda last month and we met a child who had received a light in a book, and his father was telling us about how unfortunately a sibling had been bitten by a snake prior to having the light. And this was just such a tragic story. And so I'd love to, but maybe end on an upbeat note, William, with a positive story of impact. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. There are several stories, but one of them that we've had several times, even wherever we go, is the fact that a child is receiving their first gift of a book. Because generally speaking, here in Uganda, we don't give out gifts for books. When you think about children, people think about sweets, dolls, and things like that. So this poses a great opportunity that we are giving you a book, which is opening up a new world to imagination. Now, you literally see it in the eyes of these children, going with a book home, knowing that this is mine. I'm not going to use it to wrap mandazi or to use it for anything else, but I'm going to read because they're well illustrated and they see this. So I think that in itself has been one of the encouraging stories on our part to know that you're doing something different, that someone who did not how to read a single word, but now they're able to open and tell an entire story around what's going on. So briefly, that's one of the things that really make us go forward, because we know the little that we are doing makes a difference in the lives of these young ones.
Thank you so much. That's so inspirational. And we do have one other quick question that I'd love to address quickly, and then we'll wrap up. So Manu asked about how are we making it sustainable for them? Are they buying the lights? What's the lifespan? And how do you decide which household? So the lights are not sold. They are given to the families with the light, with the books. And they receive training on how to take care of them and how long they will last for. They also, the lifespan of the light, it's warranted for 2 years, but most lights will last 5 years. And the other thing is that the needs assessments, the families are vetted by the local community, by the local community leaders, as well as the 2 teams that are on the ground there. So we're trying to meet the need of the most vulnerable. And I'm thrilled that we had such a great session, and I'm so appreciative of William that we got to end on such a high note. And Hira, over to you for the end of the session.
So thank you again to all of you, and thank you all of you for participating. I will be quick. I will just be sharing a few upcoming things in Catalyst. So we have Catalyst 2030 awards coming up. So if you know someone or if you want to nominate an organization, please go to the link that I sent in the chat. And also you can check the Catalyst Market, which was launched a few months ago, which is a platform where conscious producers and consumers are meeting. So if you want to check, the link is in the chat also. And I think that is all. And thank you again for this great session. Thank you, Sarah, Uva, William, Caroline, and Gabriel, all the speakers. And thank you everyone for joining. If there's nothing else that you want to add, of course.
Thank you all so much. It's just such a pleasure to work with such committed and brilliant and creative people. And thank you so much, Ua, and the Wharton Global Impact Consultant team too.